Welcome to 11 Recaps. Before we start, make sure you like this video and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps me keep creating content that entertain you. So, can I count on your support? Thank you for subscribing. A security firm known as Fortico is in the process of transporting an armored vehicle filled with cash when a cement truck unexpectedly obstructs the roadway. The criminals employ an excavator to lift the armored vehicle, rendering it immobile, before forcibly opening the doors and deploying stun grenades to incapacitate the security personnel. Unbeknownst to them, a young boy in a nearby vehicle observes the entire incident. Upon realizing this, the robbers command the boy to exit his car. Confused and frightened, he attempts to contact his father, who is already engaged in a phone call. Overwhelmed by terror, the boy reluctantly obeys the robbers' orders to lie on the ground. As the criminals begin to transfer the money bags, a security officer unexpectedly intervenes, managing to pull off one of the robbers' masks. In response, the robber fatally shoots him. To hide their identities, the robbers eliminate the remaining security personnel, including the boy. Patrick Hill, the boy's father, witnesses the tragic murder of his son and, in a fit of rage, charges at the robbers, only to be shot himself. Before losing consciousness, he fixates on the scarred visage of the shooter, committing it to memory. However, he survives. After 3 months of medical treatment, he is discharged from the hospital and seeks employment with the security company that was robbed. The manager, Terry, brings up the incident involving the truck, mentioning the deaths of 2 guards and a civilian. He informs Patrick Hill that he will be taking their places, but first, he must complete a series of firearm proficiency tests. He undergoes rigorous training, barely qualifying to become a guard. Once approved, he is given the nickname H. Subsequently, he meets his fellow guards, including Hollow Bob and Boy Sweat Dave. Their first drop-off assignment begins with H, and as anticipated, the day unfolds without incident, proceeding smoothly. The following day, H and Dave head out for work. Armed robbers, equipped with radios, unexpectedly compel them to halt, having targeted them. They instruct H to toss the bags of money into the rear of a pickup truck, but he intentionally drops one from the vehicle. As one of the assailants approaches, H throws a bag but swiftly shoots the man in the head. He continues to fire at the remaining gunmen with impeccable accuracy, eliminating each one before pursuing their leader. H chases the leader through adjacent buildings, ultimately cornering him and fatally shooting him. Terry scrutinizes H's conduct at work, informing him that he will be assigned to desk duty for a minimum of 1 month. Conversely, Blake Hulls, the CEO of Fortico, commends H, suggesting he merits a promotion. Subsequently, H is summoned to examine video footage from the earlier truck heist to determine if any of the assailants from the recent robbery appear familiar. He fixates on a specific robber, but ultimately informs his colleagues that nothing seems recognizable. It is later revealed that these 2 agents are affiliated with an operative named King, who believes H will guide him and his team to the individual responsible for the initial robbery. Other security personnel commend H for his courageous actions. He expresses his gratitude and resumes his duties until 3 months elapse. While en route, Bullet and H encounter a bicycle obstructing their path, and they find themselves encircled by armed assailants. A smoke device is activated, prompting Bullet to exit the truck. However, when H emerges and reveals his identity, the gunmen appear to recognize him and promptly retreat to their base. Terry is perplexed as to why the armed individuals abandon the money merely upon seeing H's face. Nevertheless, Blake interrupts Terry, informing H that he will now lead his own team and continue his current operations. Bullet engages in conversation with Boy Sweat Dave, referring to H as a dark soul, which carries deeper implications. Later that evening, H enters the residence of a guard named Dana. Upon discovering a substantial amount of cash in her apartment, he begins to interrogate her. To intimidate her, he fires several shots, prompting her to confess that she had stolen money from a job several months prior. H then presents her with 2 photographs of her parents, cautioning her about the dire repercussions should she choose to deceive him. The scene shifts back 5 months. H is spending time with his son Dougie, who is on vacation in the United States. H receives a call from his criminal boss, Mike, the leader of the gang from which H had previously escaped. Mike requests H's assistance for one final job, although he does not require H's direct involvement. H and Dougie drive to the docks where the robbery is set to occur, merely informing Mike of the truck's direction. While H is purchasing food for himself and Dougie, tragedy strikes. He witnesses the death of his son. H remains in a coma for nearly 3 months before awakening, only to learn of Dougie's demise. He subsequently meets with his ex-wife Jane, who holds H responsible for their son's death. Later, H confronts Mike and his associates, who are culpable for Dougie's fate, and agrees to assist H in locating those accountable. The organization conducts interrogations within the criminal underworld, moving from one group to another, until a man is questioned and provides the names of criminal brothers. H is taken to a location where these brothers are engaged in various heinous activities. They possess no useful information. H eliminates the brothers and notices a guard on the premises, prompting him to instruct his assistant Kirsty to retrieve some documents. These documents include background checks on the guards and the autopsy report regarding Dougie's death. We are introduced to the perpetrators of the initial robbery, a group of former Afghan veterans regarded as outcasts in America, led by a man named Jackson. His crew consists of Carlos, Sam, Tom, Brad, and Jan, the individual responsible for Dougie's death and for shooting H. They are depicted planning the truck heist at a party organized in honor of Jackson. The crew initiates the robbery, quickly noticing that H and Dougie have halted their actions. Sam commands Dougie to exit the vehicle and lie on the ground. Jan leaps over the railing and opens fire on 2 guards. Upon realizing that Dougie has recognized him, he fatally shoots him and then turns his weapon on H. Following this heist, the crew begins strategizing for their next and final operation, which involves a sum exceeding $150 million to be divided among themselves and their insider, identified as Bullet. Jackson and Tom meticulously review the plan in the weeks leading up to the event. Concerns arise regarding Jan, as his actions have strayed from the established plan. However, Jackson remains confident that he will ultimately adhere to the directives. The crew proceeds to Fortico, where Bullet admits to H that he is the informant who has guided them on which trucks to target. He disables the surveillance cameras and enters an abandoned structure. Dressed in heavy bulletproof vests, Jackson's crew enters the truck after securing H's hands. The robbery unfolds smoothly, with everyone lying face down, hands on the ground, until a guard panics and activates the emergency button. Chaos ensues as bullets fly while they blast open the door of their hideout. They begin to execute anyone in their line of sight, and during the operation, one of their own sustains an injury. After disabling the emergency button, they open the gate, allowing the last member to bring in their pickup truck for loading the cash. Meanwhile, the SWAT team has been alerted and is en route, approximately 8 minutes away. As the police establish a blockade at the entrance and the SWAT team arrives, H seizes an attacker's firearm, shooting him in the leg. He then places the man in a chokehold until he ceases to move, all while wearing bulletproof gear. Approaching a man who is loading cash into the truck, H forces him to remove his helmet. Upon realizing he is not the individual responsible for his son's death, he pulls the trigger. Meanwhile, Jackson's other team members find themselves immobilized, pinned down by Dana and another guard, resulting in a significant delay. Bullet reveals his true nature when he rushes to assist Dana, only to execute both individuals in the corridor after being handed a firearm. Dave attempts to maintain his footing as Terry is forced out, resulting in a gunshot wound. H suddenly appears, engaging in a brutal one-on-one confrontation. Despite sustaining injuries, he ultimately succeeds in eliminating the assailant. Jackson's men retrieve the wounded individual and head towards their vehicle, while H opens fire on them. Dave struggles to rise, but is shot as Terry is compelled to exit. Upon hearing a click behind him, H is struck by a bullet, leading him to believe he has succumbed to his injuries. He reloads and contacts Dave, informing him that the gunmen have departed. As Dave cautiously peeks out, he is met with a barrage of gunfire. As they make their escape, H closely observes Jan, recognizing him as Dougie's killer. Their eyes lock as they breach the gate, crashing the armored vehicle into 2 police cars. They soon find themselves pursued by SWAT teams and helicopters. After sustaining minor damage from gunfire, they take refuge in a building, barricading the entrance. With only 5 minutes to escape, they devise a plan to navigate through an underground passage that remains unknown to the public. Jackson, injured from H's well-aimed shot that grazed his neck, is ultimately dispatched by Jan when they are forced to abandon the truck. Jan and Bullet transport the money down via the elevator. They load the bags onto quad bikes, travel 3 miles, and arrive at a car. Upon realizing Jan's betrayal, Bullet attempts to eliminate him, but Jan strikes first, fatally shooting him. Jan then continues his flight with the stolen loot. With an extensive network of tunnels at his disposal, he successfully evades the police, who are unable to cover all exits in time. Eventually, Jan finds himself in an apartment, clutching all the cash. A phone suddenly rings from within his bag. At that moment, H appears behind him, throwing Dougie's autopsy report at him. Jan gazes at the document, perplexed. He starts to read about the gunshot wounds inflicted on Dougie's liver, lungs, spleen, and heart. As he looks at Dougie's photograph, he recalls H's gaze fixed on him while Dougie lay on the floor. H then proceeds to shoot Jan in the liver. Following a scream, he shifts his focus to the lungs. Jan remembers H's son, who is also lying on the floor, looking up at him. H continues his assault, targeting the spleen and ultimately the heart. Afterward, he exits the apartment and encounters Agent Kim, assuring him that the task has been completed and that he is likely to recover the stolen money. Subsequently, H enters a vehicle with another individual and departs.